it's Cupcake Kamisama back here with another video, and today I'd like to share with you some advice I've had to pick up through trial and error on my own and figure out. Whether you're watching this video whilst still in lockdown due to COVID-19, or whether you simply happen to be someone who lives on their own or is just about to move out to live on their own and are worried, how on earth am I going to get into all this without someone to help me? Hopefully this will be useful to you, because today I'll be sharing not 3 tips, but tips within 3 areas of getting dressed into Lolita all by yourself. Ugh, this wig is an uncontainable cloud. You want it to do things and it just will not. As I said, all of these tips and advice come from a place of experience. Even when I was living with my family, I couldn't always rely on them being there to help me tie my waist ties or help me with the zip if I was stuck. So I've had to learn how to overcome these things all by myself, which has been useful right now that I am actually living on my own, because it means that there isn't a dress that I'm putting off wearing because I can't get into it. My first set of tips is all about zips and zippers. If your dress is partially shirred or if it's completely unshirred, chances are it will be fastened with a zipper. The full back shirring dresses tend to just rely on the stretch to allow you to get in and out. And Lolitas for a while have been complaining to brands, particularly Angelic Pretty, about their zips not being good quality. Now, some of this might be true. I'm not a seamstress, so I can't necessarily comment on which zips are quality and which aren't. But a lot of it is to do with the fact that Angelic Pretty likes to use invisible zippers, which, as the name suggests, are zips sewn in a way that when done up, you don't see them. It looks as if the seams are meeting each other and you might just see a little bit of the bit that you pull by. Whereas the non-invisible zippers, you would be able to see straight away where they are. There might be a placket to cover them, but sometimes there isn't. However, an invisible zipper is usually used because it's seen as a more high quality finish, because again, you're not showing that fastening. It's an illusion of the dress just existing on your body. Check me out, showing off my knowledge from the Great British Sewing Bee. Having said this, invisible zippers are problematic when you're trying to do them on your own because of how they're sewn. And if a zipper is sewn extremely well, or if it's a dress that's made to measure for you rather than relying on a panel of shirring to fit a range of sizes, you probably won't have problems with that. But sometimes if the zipper is sewn just that little bit too close to the seam, it will get stuck, particularly at the waist seam. So waist seam goes like this, zipper goes like that, and where the two meet is usually where you tend to get stuck, even if you pull in your dress and you can see that it will do up. The general thing that I found with all of my Lolita dresses is that the zips are sturdier than you might think. They don't feel as such, particularly because the little handle tends to be that slim one, and you know, your fingers can't necessarily grip a lot, so it feels like you're pulling on something really flimsy. But the majority of dresses have zips that are way more sturdy than they seem. So if you are in a position where you've got a dress on yourself and your zip gets stuck at your waist, with enough perseverance you'll get through it. I don't want to say use force, because too much force can potentially break your zipper. But it's important to persevere and remind yourself it's not you, it's the dress. Because I know that when you're in that position like this and the zip is not moving any further, your brain starts playing tricks on you and it's starting to say, you've gotten too fat to fit in that dress anymore. That's usually not the case. So the first thing I recommend you doing is stop for a moment, take a deep breath, shake your hands if you need to, because it does hurt your hand to try and pull them, just stop and calm yourself down. When you're panicking or in a negative space and thinking that you're not going to be able to do it, you won't be able to do it. So taking a step back and taking a tiny break to reassure yourself that it's not you, it's the dress. It did fit before and it surely will fit now. Checking if you have to whether it still stretches far enough to reassure yourself that you can do it. One thing that I found does help in getting the zips up is loosening or completely removing your corset lacing if the dress has any. It may be that you simply haven't realised, with corset lacing being at the back and you not having eyes at the back of your head, that it's the lacing preventing shirring to stretch that little bit further to give you the additional space you need to pull the zipper up, because it is harder to pull it when it's right close to your body, which is why we try and pull it away. Removing or loosening corset lacing is an option that can help. I'll get onto corset lacing in a bit, so I'll talk about how to do corset lacing up when on your own. But if you can, and if you think that the dress won't lose anything in terms of look or fit by doing that, go for it. More often than not, I found that with the dresses that I do own, every single one of them that I have problems with zips is way easier to put on with the corset lacing off. And because in my case I tend to need all the shirring and stretch it pretty much to the end, it's not a big deal. Once you're able to pull the dress away from your body a little bit, just enough so that you can hold it with one hand to get the zip bits to come as close together as possible, and pull with the other. I recommend going slowly, and this is what I meant when I said perseverance, not force. You can by all means try and just force it up. That risks damaging the zip. Instead, try and work it little by little. Jiggle it about so that it gets past that waist seam. Once it hits the moment past waist seam, normally that's when your problems stop and it glides straight back up. So jiggle it about a little bit if you have to. Double check with the thumb of your other hand whether there's anything caught in the zip to make sure that you're not catching on your blouse or your petticoat or anything like that. If you have to, sometimes it's good to undo the zipper and start again. I'm not sure whether the extra propelling force does anything in terms of pure physics. It certainly can help emotionally and psychologically. If you have the time and are worried that this dress has never given you or anyone this much problem, do take it off for a bit and see if the zip works without anyone inside the dress, basically. It may be that the zip has genuinely broken, maybe one of the teeth has snapped or something's not quite working, so do inspect that if you're worried that this might be the case. Otherwise, I'd say keep repeating the going slowly and jiggling it about and pushing it further whilst reminding yourself to breathe and to stay calm. In most cases, this should be enough. Yes, you may end up with a very sore finger trying to pull the zip up. I recommend alternating hands if you're able to, because I have given myself a blister right there because that one time it just decided to have a dicky fit. So alternate hands if you can. Sometimes that may be just what helps. The angle at which you hold the zip with the other hand might just be the thing that helps it move up. In the rare cases where this isn't enough and you're struggling to absolutely no avail, consider having the zip replaced. I know that altering brand is a controversial thing. Really shouldn't. It's just a dress. And a dress shouldn't be giving you this much grief to put on. So if you are struggling and you do really want to keep this dress and keep wearing it, altering the zip to something more comfortable may just be the thing that you need. Again, I'm not a seamstress, but I would say that changing a zip should be an alteration that's easy to change back if you really need to. Having said this, if you do end up selling this dress on, simply saying, I've had it altered from an invisible zip to a non-invisible zip, to make it easier to put on isn't a big deal, and whoever's buying it off you might actually appreciate that you've taken that step and you've done that, because maybe they've struggled with zips in all their other dresses. So don't be afraid to take it to a seamstress, take it to your local alterations shop and say, would you be able to change the zip from invisible to non-invisible? Make sure to make that clear with them that what you're after is a zip that will be visible, because otherwise they might assume that the zip's broken and you want it changed into a new one and do you another invisible zip, which might not solve your problems. I've had at least one dress which, despite always fitting me beautifully, has also always given me tons of grief about the zip. And as soon as I changed it from invisible to non-invisible, it's one of the easiest things I have to put on right now. So to recap, if you're struggling with zips whilst getting dressed in Lolita on your own, remember the following. Stay patient and stay calm. Wiggle the zipper about slowly to get past the point that gives you trouble. Loosen or remove corset lacing from your dress if you have to. And lastly, consider replacing the zip to a non-invisible one if it's a dress that you're intent on keeping. The second area I'll talk about, which I've hinted at already, is corset lacing. Anything that involves tying bits up is usually the one that we ask our friends or our family or roommates or whoever to help us with, particularly as corset lacing is at the back and not everyone is flexible enough to just do it up. But if you're like me and you have no one around to help you, here are some things to consider. Firstly, let's start off with why does a dress have corset lacing? And it has a twofold purpose. On the one hand, it's a decorative element that usually covers up panels of shirring. It's not exclusively for that, but in a lot of cases, particularly from brands like Angelic Pretty, the corset lacing will be there to cover the panel of shirring, simply because lots of gathered up fabric isn't everyone's aesthetic cup of tea. Secondly, corset lacing allows you to adjust the fit of the dress to your body. So whether it's an unshirred garment that's cut slightly too big for yourself, or whether it's a shirred garment where the elastic stretches further in one place than the other, corset lacing allows you to adjust that so that the dress is a better fit for yourself. As I've mentioned earlier, sometimes you don't need corset lacing. And in those cases, you'll have to consider how that corset lacing is inserted into the garment and whether not having it will impact the look of your dress and your coordinate significantly. What I mean by this is, in the context of partially shirred dresses with corset lacing, if you need all of the elastic in that shirring in order to fit into the dress, you are already bypassing the problem of corset lacing is there to hide bunched up fabric, because you will not have any bunched up fabric. Your shirring will stretch to its max, meaning that the fabric it's encased in is stretched to the max and as such lying flat on your back. So you don't need to cover anything up. And if that's a look that you're happy with, or at least nonplussed about, by all means take your corset lacing out. With non-shirred garments, it's a little bit more important to consider how that corset lacing is inserted, as well as which part of your coordinate the corset lacing is at, i.e. will it be visible? So if you simply have a blouse with corset lacing that you'll be wearing under a JSK, that corset lacing probably wouldn't be visible. So even if it has two panels with grommets to lace the lacing through, it won't matter if you take the lacing out, as those panels will be hidden by your dress. However, if you were to wear that same blouse with a skirt or with an orgy coordinate, it is now up to you whether the look of two panels with grommets inside being empty across your back is a look that you are happy to have. Again, it depends on a lot of things. Will you wear this to a meetup, and are you bothered by what others at that meetup will think in terms of that aesthetic choice? Or are you simply taking pictures or recording a YouTube video and no one will see the back? In summary, taking corset lacing out is an option. It's a valid option, and whether you do so or not primarily depends on how you feel about the look and how you feel about potentially having parts of the structure holding your corset lacing being visible. There's no shame in either option, it's purely personal choice. For those who do prefer to keep the corset lacing in, my second tip is to rethread it or relace it so that the loose ends you'll be tying are at the bottom of the corset lacing panel. If you thread it from bottom up, you would normally have to be a lot more flexible in order to tie it up. However, going from top to bottom means that the loose ends are in a much more comfortable position for yourself, as well as you are able to adjust it a little bit more easily, since you won't need to stretch to reach the top bits for long. I have recently done that to all of my dresses, re-threaded corset lacing in each and every one of them so that it goes from top to bottom, and even in dresses where I've usually taken the corset lacing off, suddenly I was able to keep it in and use that to adjust the fit as I required. Another thing that could help you is replacing the corset lacing ribbon with something longer. In my case, when I still had corset lacing threaded from bottom up, my problem was that as I moved and the shirring which the corset lacing was covering stretched, the shorter ends of the ribbon would come out. Whilst rethreading corset lacing to go from top to bottom has alleviated that to an extent, I still had some dresses where the corset lacing ribbon was just a little bit too short and it would come out of its loops at the bottom as well. Having a longer ribbon bypasses that problem altogether. It also gives you more of that ribbon to pull, so however flexible you are, you should be able to reach it from here. As well as if your corset lacing ribbon is prone to falling out of the loop because you need to stretch the shirring more in certain places, having a longer ribbon will prevent that from happening. And the good thing is that ribbons used in most corset lacing that we see on dresses isn't anything majorly special. So you should be able to grab the ribbon that was already there, take it to a fabric or craft shop and look for something that matches that in width and in colour. Width is the more important one in terms of corset lacing being functional. Colour is merely personal preference. You might find something that matches the dress in colour a little bit better than the original ribbon. So stay open-minded if you're going to be replacing your ribbon. If you're not in a position to replace the ribbon altogether or just at this moment in time, another thing that you can do is consider where you need that corset lacing. When you consider what corset lacing does, it's to make things smaller. To make things bigger, that's why we have shirring and elastic. Corset lacing is there to tighten bits. What that means is you might not need corset lacing to tighten the entire panel that it's in. For example, in my case, as someone who's hourglass shaped with bigger bust than waist, I predominantly need corset lacing at the bottom where my waist is. In that case, you can rethread your corset lacing so that it only covers the part of the dress that you would actually need tightening. So just the bottom half of that corset lacing panel, leaving the top one undone. Again, doing that will have some aesthetic implications. So in this particular example, it would mean that the top of that panel is completely bare. Having said this, the top of that panel would not only have all the shirring stretched out. If you're having a long hairstyle, be it your natural or a wig, chances are your hair would cover that up. If you're wearing a bolero or a cape, that would also cover that up. And if you rethread that corset lacing, even in the portion that you need going from top to bottom, you might be able to create the illusion that this is the only part where your corset lacing actually is. So that's a personal choice for you to make, but it is one that allows you to keep your corset lacing in there and use it as you need without having to replace the ribbon straight away. So in summary of that part, if corset lacing is something that you struggle with whilst getting dressed in Lolita on your own, consider the following. Take it out entirely if you don't need it. Rethread it so that it goes from top to bottom and the loose ends are at the bottom. Rethread it so that it only covers the panel or the portion of the dress where you do need it tightened, or replace the ribbon altogether with something that's a bit longer, or a combination of those. The third area that I'll talk about when getting dressed in Lolita on your own are waist ties. Some of the advice that I have for waist ties is very similar to what I said about corset lacing. Because what you need to consider is, why are there waist ties in the first place? Again, as something that's tied, it's there to make your dress fit better and hug your waist in a flattering way, as well as add a decorative touch. And just like with corset lacing, if you don't need waist ties to make the dress sit a little bit tighter, and if you're not fussed about having a big bow on your back, removing the waist ties is a valid option if you can do it. I know plenty of Lolitas who take off the waist ties when they are detachable of every single dress that they own, in more cases than not because they are self-proclaimed struggling with doing them up in a way that they find aesthetically pleasing, but in a lot of cases also because they simply don't need it. Problem is, of course, if your dress has your waist ties sewn in. Depending on what that dress is, you could consider making the alteration to remove waist ties permanently if that's not something you need. But again, that boils down to your opinion on what is acceptable in terms of dress alterations on Lolita fashion garments. But if you do want to keep waist ties, or if you have dresses that you're not comfortable altering, so we'll have to keep the sewn in waist ties in, it's still possible to do them up on your own. Starting off with the detachable ones, the easiest thing you can do is look up a video online and follow it step by step whilst doing the waist tie at your front. That way you can see what you're doing, make whatever adjustments you need, and then simply undo the buttons and reattach the completed waist tie bow at your back. The more you do this, the better you'll get at it, and muscle memory will start kicking in, and you'll remember how to fold things, what needs to go over or under, and how things should feel. So with time and practice, you'll probably notice that you're somewhat able to do this on yourself with the waist ties at the back. It's great to practice that technique on anything that requires tying into a bow, whether that's your bolero ribbons, whether that's a ribbon you just found, whether that's tassels on your blanket or scarf, anything that you could tie into a bow, you can use to practice so that you develop that muscle memory. Of course, when you can't necessarily see what you're doing or be in the most comfortable position to adjust things, doing it at the back might not come out as pretty as it would at the front, but it's also not going to be a disaster that you wouldn't dare show anyone. So with practice doing waist ties up when they're detachable, you should eventually be able to create something good enough on waist ties that are not detachable, and you can't just contort yourself to flip it over your head and be at the back. If you can do that, then by all means, but only if it's safe. And going back to what I said earlier, do consider the context of where you're wearing your dresses. If you plan on going out in your coordinate, then you probably will want to spend a little bit more time fussing over that bow and making sure that it's as pretty as you can make it. However, if you're just going to be staying at home, the only person that will know is you, so it's up to you how bothered you are, with the knowledge that your waist tie bow is not the most pretty one whilst it's sat at your back. Moreover, if you are wearing your coordinate out and you're wearing it to a meetup where there will be other Lolitas, you can also consider whether there is someone there who you'd be able to ask for some help. And if so, and if that person would be willing, and in my experience, every com has at least one person who's proficient enough with waist ties and usually happy to help others do them up, then you can do your best on your own, because it will only be there for as long as it takes you to get to the meetup. And there you could ask that person, would you mind helping me with this please? So in a summary, if waist ties is what you struggle with, consider either removing them if you can or are willing to with non-detachable waist ties, or practice particularly on detachable waist ties first by doing the bow at the front and reattaching it to sit at your back, so that eventually you're good enough to do a decent enough bow at the back all by yourself, as well as considering the context where you'll be wearing your coordinate and whether having a waist tie bow that's not the prettiest will have a significant impact on your outfit. And on that note, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you have found it useful, and I hope that you've picked at least one thing up from it. Even though my advice is aimed at the Lolitas who, for whatever reason, have to get dressed on their own, this is something that anyone could benefit from, whether it's because you don't want to constantly be asking people for help, or whether you feel like you need those tips and skills in case you find yourself in a situation where there isn't anyone around to ask for said help. Anyone could try any of these and you can become self-sufficient in terms of getting yourself dressed in your favourite frills. If you have enjoyed this video, then make sure to give it a thumbs up, comment on it, subscribe to the channel. I aim to make at least one video a month. These days that video tends to be the Around Your Wardrobe in 30 Coordinates challenge. However, as you can gather by this one, I am trying to make more content outside of that. So do make sure to subscribe and to hit that bell button to make sure that you're notified when I upload something, as it might not be as regular. If you'd like to encourage me to make sure that I am creating more than just the one video a month, then I suggest you buy me a cup of coffee. A link to my coffee page is in the description box below. And as always, I encourage all of you to check out my blog, which is Cupcakes and Unicorns, where you'll find more Lolita content. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye!